The main talk today is about this event that happened in Montreal a few weeks ago, the International Funders Workshop, The Future of Research Software. So it's an initiative that came out of the Research Software Funders Forum, which is a regular forum, an online forum that happens every 6 weeks. The Research Software Alliance, my organization, convenes, and it's a collaboration of about 30 different funding organizations that have been coming together for 18 months now to talk about sharing best practice, but how to improve the number of funders involved in supporting research software and coordination across some of the funders. Very brief information. We are mostly government organizations from around the world, but includes philanthropy and industry, mostly the Americas and Europe, but have a few other geographical regions represented as well, and are always looking to try and even up some of those statistics. These are some of the organizations that have engaged either in that funders forum that takes place online every 6 weeks, or the funders forums that we've held face-to-face or in Amsterdam a couple of years ago, and hybrid in Montreal just recently. And so the funders forum purpose is really about sharing practices and thinking about how to work together to address challenges. I'm just going to go through these quickly because there are a lot of them, but you've got the links, so if there's anything that catches your eye, you can certainly go back and look at them in your own time. So one of the important things that happened at the first event in Amsterdam last year was that we began drafting the Amsterdam Declaration for Funding Research Software Sustainability. So I'll be talking a little bit more about that as we go through. The drafting started a year ago, and the version 1 was then released for signing just ahead of Montreal, and so is now available for organizations to sign. And I'm very impressed that we've got 4 who've already managed to shepherd it through their internal signing processes, and we've got 4 signatories so far. I know a number of others still working the document through their signing processes. In terms of what happened in Montreal, nope, that's not, I haven't moved slides there, sorry. What happened in Montreal? Well, as Carol has already highlighted, Carol gave the first talk. So I'm just going to highlight some of the main talks. Carol gave a really good overview to help us all ensure we're on the same page and using the same language when talking about research software, by helping explain what it is and really why it's so critical. Bearing in mind that some of the people in the room were funders that are well versed in what research software is and really have dedicated programs. And some of the people in the room were funders who are relatively new to that terminology, may definitely invest in research and maybe in open science, but hadn't come across research software as an entity in its own right. And there are also a range of other community members in the room as well. Some of the fantastic things that Carol talked about. Carol, it feels funny describing your slides while you're in the room.
I'll be interested to know what you say.
I just cribbed a few of them. She gave a number of different ways that research software can be defined. This is one that's getting an increasingly common use, work by Tom Honeyman and with Andrew Gelora, who's of course on this call from the Australian Research Data Commons, to identify different types of software in terms of whether it's analysis code, prototype tools, or research software infrastructure. And one of the key points that Carol made repeatedly throughout her talk is that research software is all dependent upon people, that it's people who make, use, and resource software that they're at the heart. So on these slides, you can also click on the green links and they'll take you to the rest of Carol's presentation, and we will have a video of that presentation, all the presentations going up in the near future. One of the other keynotes was from Josh Greenberg, who is from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation and is one of the leads of I guess, I think it's their open science program, which invests in a range of different things in the research software community. Their focus is less on supporting research software in itself, but more about the ecosystem and how to ensure things like sustainability. So he asked some interesting questions. How much and when should we worry about technical debt? These were open questions, no easy answers to these, but certainly things to encourage a room full of mostly funders to think about. Sorry, the menu is just above the writing. Who should do what kinds of software work, and we'll pick up on that again later when I talk about some of the breakouts. Referred to this recent publication on hiring, managing, and retaining some of those staff. And some questions around how central should open source be. So they're highlighting the work that Richard Littau leads on sustain open source software, and Sloan of some other investments supported a range of other projects in the open source community as well. It's also a keynote from Malvika Sharan on exploring the do not harm principles in our research software communities. So quite a different approach to thinking about how we should ground research software initiatives and community. The do not harm principles mean taking a step back from an intervention to look at the broader context and to mitigate potential negative effects or harms on the social fabric, the economy, and the environment. So she spent a bit of time defining what they were and then considering how they could be applied to the work we do. So she delineated them into 4 different effects: rights of beneficiaries, functioning of communities and relation between actors, environmental context, and local economies. And then use some of the work that she's engaged with, such as her work at the Turing Way in the UK, to show some of the examples of how we can implement these principles. And this was another example she gave about environmental impact as another way that we can consider how we can reduce the harm of projects or work that we do. So again, a very interesting talk. Again, the videos will be up shortly. And in the meantime, you can click on one of the links there right at the beginning. I think the title has a link in the title there to her actual slides. And so final thoughts from Malvika, that funders can lead the way in setting the right incentives and recognition in place for all roles. She also suggested that they focus more on capacity building goals that bridge scientific and economic divides, and apply community-oriented frameworks to extend benefits. One of the other talks I just wanted to highlight was on the Amsterdam Declaration on Funding Research Software Sustainability. As I mentioned earlier, this was the version 1 was just released prior to the workshop and was made open for signing. So just to share a little bit about what the declaration is. The purpose is to raise awareness of the role of funding practice in the sustainability of research software and to improve that practice. So it's a first step towards formalizing on a global level the basic principles and recommendations related to funding sustainability of research software, including the people needed to achieve this goal. The declaration itself, I'm not going to go through all the recommendations in detail, but there's 12 recommendations in 4 different areas. The first area is research practice. So some recommendations on how funders can really better support research practice, like stimulating documentation, licensing, open source distribution and accessibility of research software, incentivizing the reuse and improvement of existing research software. The second set of recommendations are around the research software ecosystem, that funders should support people, communities, infrastructure, not just research software products in itself, outputs in itself. And then they should share information across those and think about the funding instruments that they use and ensure they're fit for purpose for enabling sustainability and innovation. The third area of recommendations is around people and research software. Recommendations around how funders can support those key roles, providing them with reward and recognition measures that enable career progression, and doing things like requiring citation practices for research software to recognise the range of contributions that occur. And the fourth and final set of recommendations of the declaration around research software ethics, that appropriate indicators to assess research software should be used, that there should be some consideration of environmental and social impacts, and that diversity, the equity and inclusivity, of course, are significant factors in making research software sustainable. If you have a look at the declaration itself, it's fairly short. It gives a little bit of background as to how we got to here, and then details the recommendations themselves. There's also an accompanying toolkit, the Audit Software Toolkit, which provides a whole lot of additional information and can really help organisations think about implementation of some of the recommendations. So, for example, has examples of some of the funding programs that funders already have that focus on some of the recommendations, and some other things related to definitions, some examples of useful resources when useful papers, for example, have been written. And it's really a living document. We always welcome suggestions on additional things that can be added to that, so that everyone in the ecosystem can continue to benefit from the work that each other's doing. So thanks to Dan Katz for those slides that I've used there. So to continue on what happened in Montreal, as I've said, we had a number of keynotes, we had some talks about the declaration, and then we had 3 breakouts throughout the 2 days. The first one focused on funder practices, the second on research software platforms, infrastructure and communities, and the third on building capacity. And each of the breakouts was designed to relate to one of the 12 principles in the declaration, so that we could get a smaller group of people really thinking about how to implement or better work with each of the 12 recommendations. So again, I won't go through these in a lot of detail. There's a report coming out probably later next month, which will have a lot more detail on all of the discussions that happened and the notes coming out of them. But this is just to give you a little bit of an idea. So the first breakout on capacity building, there was some discussion on research software practice and how funders could benefit from investing in both development of research software, but also ongoing maintenance and reuse, so investing in after the fact. In terms of the research software ecosystem, there was discussion about a multilateral funding initiative that has come out of the Research Software Funders Forum working group, and some engagement that's happening with the Global Research Council, which is an international group of funders. In that breakout, there was also discussion on personnel, and that the people know in that discussion, we're talking about how funders can incentivize researcher developers to develop better software engineers, or whether they should be focusing more on funding RSE professionals, and or both. And that breakout also had a group talking about ethics and how do you measure research software impact, a very complex question. Interesting to see that Chan Zuckerberg Initiative are hosting a hackathon on that in a few weeks, actually, and we'll see what comes out of that. The second breakout, again, had 4 groups in it. The first one talking about open science program officers. So Richard Littau was there talking about the work of his community and some of the others that are very relevant here. In terms of the second breakout group on research software ecosystems, there was some discussion on how we can obtain more evidence, more recommendations to ensure the initiatives are evidence-led. Could we reverse the funding mechanisms so that projects get funded after they're up and running as a function of how much they were used? There was some brainstorming around that, as one of the funders is actually trying to do a pilot on that in 2024. In the breakout group on personnel, again, there was some more discussion on indicators in relation to research assessment reform this time, noting that at the moment very few research software outputs are being assessed, that indicators are fragmented, and there's some suggestions on some short-term wins in terms of at least sharing what information we do all have, so that we can build towards some international approaches. And finally, in that second session on ethics, the question was raised, does anyone measure or address the environmental impact of research software? So there's some good work being done in the high performance computing community, and we'd love some more resources to add on that to the toolkit. So please send anything in. But I guess a newly emerging discussion, particularly in relation to research software. The third and final breakout group, again, had a session on practice. So the 4 topics relate to the 4 major sections of the declaration, thinking about how we can implement the FAIR for Research software principles. There is a working group within the Research Software Funders Forum talking about that. So this group was asking some questions on whether funders should create guidance individually for their own organisation, or should they be creating guidance collectively, and how could the community help them in doing that. In relation to the ecosystem, some discussion on how funders use persistent identifiers and how publishers could be more engaged around this. In relation to personnel, the third group was focusing specifically on research software directories and their role, and looking at the research software directly coming out of the Netherlands. And the final group didn't happen. We ended up, it was too small, so we disbanded. So in terms of some of the overall outcomes for the event, it was successful in widening the group of funders who were engaged in these conversations. There was a number of funders who we hadn't seen in some of these discussions before. As I said, a number who invested obviously considerably in research software, or in research, or maybe in open source software, or maybe in open science, but hadn't particularly had a research software focus before. It was useful in being able to expand the reach of some of the Funders Forum working groups that are working towards specific aims. So for them, having breakouts where they could brainstorm their work with a wider group was particularly useful. For example, there's one of the working groups is expecting to present at the Global Research Council next year. So they were able to get some additional members to support that work. It enabled us to highlight a range of areas where coordination by funders would be particularly beneficial, and we hope that further working groups might form to consider some of those, and also enabled exploration of some other opportunities for different types of forums, whether it be ReSA working groups or RDA working groups, or other ways in which the community could benefit from coming together to discuss common challenges.